woke, wet and hard left actor Hugh Grant has finally had it with left-wing London, the UK's capital, which I've been saying for years is going down the toilet. So in a tweet, or a post on X, I should say, that he has now deleted after a storm of outrage, he posted who exactly effed London. Dug up, coned, paralysed, miserable. I need someone to hate. Carl Benjamin of Lotus Eaters reposted that and said Hugh Grant has noticed that London is no longer an English city. And is it a surprise that even the leftists are noticing just how grim it has become to live in UK's capital? I mean, look at these scenes from East London during the weekend. Now, of course, Hugh Grant is a very stupid man. Charlie Downs, a very stupid man, because he deleted the tweet because he didn't like the truth. And the truth was, it's your mates who have destroyed London. It's hard left rule, it's mass immigration, it's Sadiq Khan not dealing with crime because he's so concerned with Islamophobia or being accused of racism. But actually, it was very enlightening, wasn't it, that initial post?
It is fascinating. I mean, Hugh Grant, in my mind, very much belongs to this time, essentially the kind of Blair years, with Love Actually, where he was essentially playing Tony Blair.
Yes.
And to see somebody like him, who is so thoroughly embedded in that cultural and political kind of zeitgeist, waking up to the consequences of that political and cultural zeitgeist, is really, really funny, if nothing else. But it does speak to a larger issue, which is that London, and I'm there all the time, unfortunately, London is visibly getting worse every single day. Every time I go there, I see, it's as if it can't get any worse. And then it does, homeless encampments, knife crime, social housing being occupied by people who have arrived here in, the last couple of years and so on. And all of it, comes down to mass immigration, which in turn is a consequence of an elite class that we've had for the better part of 30 years who don't care about Britain and who don't listen to the concerns of the people of this country. And if we don't solve these problems, if we don't solve the primary problems of a broken political system and a terrible and damaging policy of mass immigration, you inevitably see the rise of secondary problems. This is something that Douglas Murray talks about all the time. Secondary problems like those scenes that we just saw: riots, violence, fighting. And the response of this government is to police the secondary problems, to crack down, to increase police presence and police power. And actually, that's just like treating the symptoms instead of the root cause of a disease. We live in a sick society, and our elite class see fit to just, keep patching up every single wound that appears without actually addressing the fact that our society is being attacked at its very roots. And my belief now is that unless something happens very, very quickly, unless this illness in our society is treated with some kind of emergency surgery, instead of this kind of incremental, pathetic, ineffective, sort of treatment, then things are going to get really, really bad. I think that nothing less than a robust policy of essentially remigration will solve this.
Very well put, Charlie. And in fact, what is so concerning, because if you're watching outside of London and thinking, this isn't going to impact me, I promise you, where London goes, the rest of the UK follows. And David Campbell Bannerman, I don't say this with any joy. I mean, I chose to make London my home 20 years ago. I loved this city. I was one of those people that thought I would never want to leave London. But it has become an absolutely miserable, broken place to live. I've been the victim of crime. I have had my phone stolen from me twice. I mean, when you live in a society, David, where you literally cannot get your phone out on the street because there is a high likelihood that it will be stolen out of your hand when you cannot rely on the police to even attend your home once it's been burgled. That is surely the breakdown of society.
Yeah, well, I agree, Dan. I mean, I used to have a place in Ealing, and I've left that actually a few years ago.
Sensible.
And I could see London going down. It's very sad after over 21 years. And I think it's policing, particularly, or the lack of policing. The only time you see the police is speeding past you or ordering a curry, actually. That was my experience in Ealing. I think immigration is the big driver. It's just the sheer scale of change and the numbers that are causing this. I'm actually beginning to wonder whether Hugh Grant is preparing the ground to move out for tax reasons, actually. I mean, Charlie Mullins is gone. He was a great Remainer. And, he's protecting his tax. And remember, the Rolling Stones went abroad and the Bee Gees went abroad when Labour brought heavy taxation in the 70s. So it could be part of the big movement. We've lost, we're going on for about 10,000 millionaires leaving the country.
But first, it's the best time of year because football's back. We're talking Premier League in the UK and in the US, NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. With that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups, which is where your inner manager comes alive, setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV, making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the person that everyone ridicules in the group chat, which is always me. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench, because let's be honest, no one wants to fumble their grooming routine. That's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue ear and nose hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. It will help you feel clean, confident, and ready to dominate your fantasy league. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise ear or nose hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0, I love the name of that, handles these details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming game. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes with 2 free gifts today: the Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag, premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the over 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading over to www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken today for 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. So let me just repeat, 20% off and free shipping with the code Outspoken at checkout. All you need to do is head to www.manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. There's lots of two-tier rubbish going on when it comes to politics, and especially when it comes to this new Labour government, which is immediately proving itself to be, I would argue, highly corrupt and also highly unpopular. So what we've seen is these revelations that Lord Ali, the very, very rich Labour donor and peer, who we already knew was getting special access to number 10 Downing Street in the wake of Starmer's election, is now donating tens of thousands of pounds in order to dress Lady Starmer, Keir Starmer's wife. Now, it feels like she was taking the piss out of us all today, because in the wake of these revelations this morning, remember, this is a woman who has claimed for a long time, I don't want to be in the spotlight. She turned up at a fashion show for London Fashion Week at something called the Edeline Lee Fashion Show. I mean, the front of that. And of course, it comes hot on the heels of David Lammy, Mr. Socialist himself, who in the past was lambasting Boris and Carrie Johnson over wallpaper in number 10 Downing Street. But all of a sudden, he is defending the need for Starmer and his wife to receive funding for their clothes, despite the fact they are incredibly wealthy individuals with a fortune of over £10 million. Watch this pathetic explanation.
I recognise that, but I also recognise that in our country, there isn't a budget for the Prime Minister's clothes or his wife's clothes. In some countries, there's a substantial budget. I've just come back from America where there is a substantial budget to ensure that the US President and the First Lady, their appearance can never be challenged. That is not the case in our country.
Interesting, though, because let's go and listen to Starmer's own words when he was taking Boris Johnson to task in Parliament in 2021.
Keir Starmer.
Answer the question. That's what the public scream at their televisions every PMQs. Answer the question. The Prime Minister hasn't answered the question. He knows he hasn't answered the question. He never answers the question. The Prime Minister will be aware that he's required to declare any benefits that relate to his political activities, including loans or credit arrangements, within 28 days. 28 days, Prime Minister, yes. He will also know that any donation must be recorded in the register of the Minister's interests, and that under the law, any donation of over £500 to a political party must be registered and declared. So the rules are very clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence or offences may have occurred. That's incredibly serious. Can the Prime Minister tell the House, does he believe that any rules or laws have been broken in relation to the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat?
I mean, David Campbell Bannerman, you could not make this up. He is describing his own situation within weeks of entering number 10. The guy is a despicable hypocrite. David Campbell Bannerman, can you hear me? Oh, I think we've lost him. Charlie Downs, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest, I'm actually kind of sick of those of us who occupy our politics accusing leftists of being hypocrites, because they don't care. They don't have any principles. They don't care about fairness. They don't care about holding their friends to the same standards as their enemies. We care about these things because we care about these sort of old fusty ideas of fairness and of honor and of dignity. But these people don't. They view those things as being relics of the past that aren't worth preserving. Same goes with the accusation of racism, by the way. I mean, I think that, the right in general really needs to move away from saying the left are the real racist, because they don't care. They don't care. Racist is their word, and they use it to describe everything. So when you use it back against them, it's not going to work. It's not effective.
So I'm really interested in that, Charlie, because I do agree with you to a certain extent. But is the solution, because I think about this a lot, is the solution just to say, actually, you be as racist as you want, that's absolutely fine, but we believe in free speech, and actually daylight is the best disinfectant, so go right ahead?
It's a tricky one because, proper racism is obviously a terrible thing, and it does happen. It happens on both the left and the right. But in terms of political strategy, basically, using the language of your enemies against your enemies is an ineffective tactic. And so I think that we on the right should escape the kind of mind prison of left-wing language, where everything is racist and everything is sexist and everything is that, isn't the other. Even the language of like communities, for example. I've actually heard David use that in this interview. That's the language of the left. You shouldn't use that sort of language. And the talk of values as well, British values, that's an invention of Tony Blair and his government. All of these concepts that have become so deeply embedded in our political language that we need to escape from, because they don't do us any favors. Actually, I think what we should be doing is understanding that the left don't care about hypocrisy. They don't care about being called hypocrites. And so actually what we should go at them at, the kind of level at which we should attack them, is you enable some of the worst crimes conceivable. With Hugh Edwards today being a prime example, his behavior, the fact that he is basically above the law, is facilitated by the kind of morality that left-wing politics encourages, where all virtue is understood as being, taking part in social causes and so on, instead of in pursuits of goodness and so on.
And it was
anyway,
really it was really.
Sorry, I was going to say, just to get back to
yes,
this story. It is very disappointing. But Keir Starmer is not a man who has principles, and quite frankly, another thing we have to ask is, what favors was he doing for Lord Ali in exchange for all of this money that's, in my view, essentially being laundered through his wife? That's the real question we have to ask.
Indeed. And remember, he wasn't planning to reveal it at all. At all. And he knew full well that if it involved his wife, given the position that he had taken on Carrie Johnson, that it should have been revealed to the public. So who knows what shady stuff is going down. Certainly the relationship between Lord Ali, both Lady Starmer and Keir Starmer, completely stinks. And the mainstream media would be all over it if it were a Tory. Paul Brand, Beth Rigby, Robert Peston, they would be asking about nothing else. But of course, in this case, they are virtually ignoring it. Credit and kudos to the Sunday Times, part of the mainstream media that did break the story, but the mainstream broadcast media has totally ignored it. One thing that is brilliant, though, and you cannot ignore, the unpopularity of this new Labour government. Two examples of that. Firstly, Starmer at the races this weekend. And then Alex Baker, the MP.
Not welcome. Traitor.
Guys, that is enough.
Rush more people first.
That was in a local pub. She posted on X following that event going viral. It's disappointing some people feel it's okay to behave like this, especially when they see me out for lunch with my young family. I'll always be ready to discuss the issues that matter most to my neighbours, but this behaviour gets us nowhere and I will not be intimidated. So Charlie Downs, where do you stand on that reaction to Alex Baker? Should she have been left alone, or do her constituents have a right to be furious?
I'm kind of in two minds. I mean, I yearn for a time where politics was more respectful and dignified than this. But on the other hand, an important piece of context to understand in this particular case is the fact that where this MP was, Rushmore, 1 in 4 people are immigrants. And in Aldershot in particular, which is a town that I used to live very near to and that I went to many times, 50% of that town is white British. This is one of the places that's at the forefront of the brunt and damage of mass immigration. And so these are people, the working class men and women in this pub will be people who are at the absolute, the razor's edge of the damage that's being done to Britain by the policies of mass immigration of consecutive governments. And so I don't blame them for feeling this way, for looking at the power structure that governs us, noting the fact that it seems to prioritize immigrants over the native British. And then when they express discontent, when they express a little bit of concern about that fact, they're thrown in prison. So, I don't blame these people for having this reaction, because what other recourse do they have?
Yeah. Well, David Campbell Bannerman, great to have you back. I think we have you back. Can you hear us now? Excellent. I can hear you. I think that's a really fair point, isn't it? Because we're constantly told that we can't have the debate. So after the Southport massacre, now was not the time to have the debate about mass immigration. Starmer still is now saying, I'm not going to have the debate about mass immigration because that's just giving into the quote unquote far right. So actually, do we need to start fronting up our elected representatives in a peaceful manner? Of course, that always has to be the defining quality when we give this sort of advice. But where else are people able to express their complete discontent about being ignored?
I think it's very dangerous, this, Dan, and, one doesn't condone violence on the streets, obviously, but the underlying issues, as Charlie has touched on, are very very strong ones, and justified at the scale of immigration. You can see it in the Republic of Ireland, that is actually getting very serious, very dangerous in parts. It's the same kind of issue, and in Italy, Starmer's there today. It does need addressing, and it needs to be spoken about, because people are worried about the sheer scale of the numbers coming in and how it's changing their society. An increase of 10 million since Labour came in under Blair. In our population, did we vote for that? Did we really want that? It's never really been discussed. And I think, just lastly, I mean, the thing that worries me about Labour is, I accept as a Democrat, they got a majority, but it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And what's really happened is the Conservative vote collapsed, by 20%, and turnout went down to almost half, which is unheard of. And the danger is that there isn't actually a popular movement behind the policies that Labour represent, like dropping Rwanda. That was very popular. 70% of people, even a lot of Labour people, were behind that Rwanda policy. And then today we see Starmer actually talking about sending them to Albania rather than Rwanda. I mean, it's the same policy, which is offshore processing. So it is a dangerous situation where the government is well out of touch, actually, in terms of policies.
Indeed. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.